African Union campaign to silence the guns in 2020, a reality or a dream? On African Perspective this Wednesday, we get reactions from South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and former President Thabo Mbeki.
The continent and its leaders is not sitting back and doing nothing. It is continuously engaged in peace efforts.
With regard to Darfur, they were very close to a conclusion, a finalization of all the necessary agreements until the demonstrations broke out.
Watch African Perspective.
I'm now joined by Tsepiso Makwetla from African Perspective. Thanks for your time on The Full View. You've got a former president and a present president talking about the African continent. What's going to be coming up?
So the interesting part of that, obviously the incumbent Cyril Ramaphosa is going to take over the chairmanship of the AU next year. But also, as you know, South Africa also sits on the UN Security Council. So heavyweight responsibilities from a regional perspective. Former President Thabo Mbeki was very much instrumental in negotiating, mediating the conflicts in the North and South Sudan. If you look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has now had elections and peaceful elections by all respects, but there are still tensions about the rightful leader. He was instrumental in that. Zimbabwe, which is another conflict that he talks about, which is still a hotbed at the moment. We know the recent ructions that we've seen. And there's Cote d'Ivoire, where we saw the ISS release former President Laurent Gbagbo of the Ivory Coast from the criminal court. So we talk about that, but within the context of that Vision 2020, silencing the guns, Africa has this ambitious goal of halving the conflicts on the continent by 2020. Is that achievable? That's a question we ask. I mean, if you look at the peacekeeping missions by the United Nations, 8 of the 15 are on the African continent. So the various disarmament programs, the issue of funding, of disarming fragile communities, that's a very, very big goal, an ambitious one. And we're going to unpack some of those conflicts to see just how far away we are and if it is indeed achievable.
There's also that summit that's just wrapped up. Are we going to get a little bit of news from that?
Indeed. So we're going to be looking at that 32nd ordinary session of the AU, where some of those issues were discussed. There were sideline meetings, for instance, by President Cyril Ramaphosa with Emmerson Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe, with Tshisekedi of the DRC, and of course, as I mentioned, former President Thabo Mbeki attending as a member of the former heads of state, which themselves are an influential body in guiding current 55 members of the AU on how to deal or grapple with some of these problem areas.
Tsepiso Makwetla on African Perspective, 9:30 tonight. You can catch the show on Channel 404 at 9:30.